Hey there, vinyl community. So, thought today we'd cover a little bit of Johnny Thunder with the passing of David Johansen. Been listening to the New York Dolls and kind of got me listening to Johnny Thunder. And I think the Johnny Thunder catalog is kind of, I always found it to be kind of complicated when I was getting into it because there were so many releases and there were so many bootlegs and it was hard for me to like really pick like what was really important in his catalog, and so thought I'd maybe try to simplify that for somebody who's just getting to the point where they want to explore that catalog, maybe because of David having passed away, which was terrible. A lot of these rock stars pass away, and it's you certainly don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody, but the David Johansen one was particularly hard for me, just because the New York Dolls were one of my early bands. They kind of came along shortly after Kiss, and they had a lot of appeal. They were controversial in their own way, and kind of in your face. They had that sound, that kind of proto punk sound, which I always kind of liked, and the people who I kind of grew up in neighborhood where that was kind of a cool thing. Anyway, listening to some Bronski Beat today. Yeah, pretty good album. I haven't listened to it in ages, and it was kind of fun to pull it out. Also wanted to. I got a really nice Diamond Marimba. Alex sent me a VCLT and of two really, really beautiful records. And I just really been kind of listening to them all weekend. And just to say thank you to Alex, just really kind of hard to describe. This group, 180, is kind of avant-garde classical, really beautiful, interesting. Actually, there's some tracks on here that are pretty exhilarating, and Terry Riley is even on this, which is a name some folks might know. But just some really great stuff, and just so kind of Alex, who's a cool guy, man. If you don't know his channel, he's one of the best that the vinyl community has to offer. Just a really cool guy. This is a really beautiful record, and I'm really taken by it. I don't know which one of these records I like more. I keep kind of bouncing back and forth. Right now, probably I'd say this one, but they're both really special, and it's nice when somebody thinks of you and wants to give you the gift of music. Man, there's just no better gift than that. So, thanks, Alex. I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you. Um, so anyway, talk about so we all know David Johansen passed away last week. I think everybody kind of knows this first Dolls album, and this was a big album for me, and found this in a used record store back when I was just a kid, and it really was really taken by it. Just the way the band looked. They were kind of like at the time I remember like Kiss was kind of growing out of my Kiss stage, and looking for something a little bit cooler, and the Dolls kind of fit that bill. They had that like New York sassiness about them, and these kind of tough looking guys, dressed up, in high heels and wigs and stuff like that. It also, this is a record that didn't make my parents too happy at the time, which was great for me. I couldn't have been happier about that. And great songs on this first record. Personality Crisis, everybody knows. But there's Lonely Planet Boy, Trash, Bad Girl, Looking for a Kiss, all great songs. This is a really great first. And there's Johnny right there. And but what I've read about it is most of the band was more than happy to kind of dress up in women's clothing and stuff. But Thunder was a guy who kind of refused right from the beginning. He would wear the high heels, but that was the extent of it. And makeup he would put on, but he wouldn't wear any of the blouses or or skirts or anything like that that they would give him. And so he was always kind of the standout cool guy. And yeah, great record, good highlight. Then there's the kind of overlooked, and I would say all of these albums that I was going to show, I think, give you a really good overview of Johnny Thunders' career, and would be a good place for somebody to start. There's a lot of other records that have tracks on them that are worthwhile, but I think there's 5 records here, give you a nice overview of Johnny Thunder if you're first wanting to get into his music and understand it a little bit better. The second Dolls record, which is a really, really good record, overlooked. I think the first one was such a classic in a way, that the second one kind of gets overlooked. And the band delves into kind of mixing kind of 50s rock and roll with glam and hard rock, and in mixing in this kind of together, that all kind of mixed together into this kind of proto-punk sound that would, just a few years from when this came out, would be really, really big. And they were a huge influence on all the English bands, the Damned and the Clash and the Sex Pistols, all very, very influenced by the sound on these couple of records. And this is a great record too. Lots of great songs on here: Puss in Boots, Bad Detective, Babylon. And so I would say both of these records are very, very much, you have to if you want to understand Johnny Thunder's career, that these would be, really pivotal to getting to understand his sound and where he was coming from. So once you kind of get past the Dolls, and then you get right away. So the Dolls break up. Largely, some interesting circumstances, and there's a lot of good books. I should have pulled some of my books out to show, because it helps to understand the history of the band and where they were coming from. So they try to continue that record comes out. It doesn't do as well as the first one. The band is really struggling. Malcolm McLean, who later would help found the Sex Pistols, actually is hired as their manager, and puts together another version of the band with the guys, and has this great idea that he says he wants them to all dress in red, so they dress in red. I have a CD of kind of some demos from this next part of their career, and they're going to fly the communist flag behind them while they're on stage. Well, you can imagine how that went over. And it didn't go over really big. McLean thought it was a good way of grabbing some controversy, and he was right there in a certain degree. It did have a kind of, the music from that era though is still pretty good. And while they're on tour, the band, part of the problem the Dolls had as a band is they couldn't really tour outside of New York, because several of the band members, Thunder included, were so at this point already had delved so much into drugs that they couldn't leave the dealer and go on tour, because they would start to go through withdrawals. And so their manager, Malcolm, makes some dates for them in Florida, I think Texas. And while they're in Florida, Thunder and Nolan, I think, leave and go back to New York right in the middle of the tour. And they go back to score and leave the dates, and they're forced to kind of, the rest of the Dolls were kind of forced to kind of scrap together some members and try to make the performances anyway. An exciting time, in a certain way. That was pretty much the end of the Dolls, and that later period is worth investigating, but I don't think that it's not pivotal. The first 2 Dolls records, that's really kind of where it's at. From there, shortly thereafter, Johnny Thunder strikes off on his own, forms his own band called the Heartbreakers. And the Heartbreakers were really kind of left behind some of the more poppy influences that the Dolls had. with trying to like create songs that might make it on the radio. Not that there's not some really catchy songs in the Heartbreakers either, but he went much more for a harder rock, proto punk sound that on this record here. And this is again another classic, another kind of punk or pre-punk classic right here. And fantastic record. There's a bunch of different versions of this. The album was always kind of criticized for sounding a little bit flat, and I suppose it does have some, in that way it does have some weakness. But they've tried over and over again to remix it, and I don't think they ever really, improved it. There's certain aspects of it that were a little bit better here or there. When I go to grab this record, I grab this version of it, and that's the original version of it. And yeah, there's the track listing. Two notorious tracks from this is Born to Lose and Chinese Rock. Chinese Rock is a direct reference to heroin and their ongoing addiction to. The band was filled with drug problems, which hampered their ability to go on, and didn't stop them from making a really terrific record. And yeah, if you're at all interested in Johnny Thunder and want to know a little bit more about his career, this is really kind of something that you want to investigate. And a great record and a lot of fun. And from here, Thunder goes on. So the Heartbreakers, just by the very nature of kind of what they were doing, they went to New York and toured with the Pistols, and but the drugs were such a difficulty to overcome, and really kind of held them back from achieving really maybe what they might have been capable of doing. And that was kind of the tragedy of Johnny Thunder, and you almost have to mention it. Every book that I've ever read that talks about him, somewhere in there I think was probably a pretty sensitive soul, but he was also a pretty rough and difficult guy. And when he was on drugs, drug addicts can be selfish, and certainly had that reputation. There's some really good accounts from Star Sable, who was one of the early kind of groupies, who he was apparently Johnny Thunder was really in love with her, and she talks about him in a both in a sympathetic way, because she kind of seemed to understand him, and he seemed to be in love with her. And she said there was a really kind of, in some ways, a kind of traditional guy, and that he was just really kind of wanted her to be at home and him to go out. And she said that there was a really sweet guy there, but that that he was also capable of violence and other things too. So it's like so many people, stars and artists who go on to create great music and stuff, he was a flawed human being, and certainly deserves that tag, and it held him back probably from maybe in a commercial way achieving more. Although I think that few artists there's 3 albums that you would consider really kind of punk or proto-punk classics, and how many people get to make 3 albums? But there's one more. Here's another one. This is his first solo record, although some of the Heartbreakers play on this record. This is So Alone. And this has the big classic on this one is Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory, which is I think really kind of shows Thunder's more his kind of the sweeter side of his nature, or maybe not sweeter, but there was a kind of tragic sense about him, and he seemed to sense it about himself, that he was not going to go on that much longer, or go on to have the kind of career that he might otherwise have had. This is full of good, trashy, proto-punk, punk rock. There's some great tracks on here. It does have there's a song on it that has Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy is on here. There's a song called London Boys. Uh, London Boys was all about the time. This was recorded in the UK, and Thunder was really critical of like the Clash and the Sex Pistols, who he saw as like kind of posers in his mind. Um, and from everything that I've read, the Pistols and the Clash were a little weary of the Heartbreakers because they were older. For one, they were older and kind of battle hardened from the road. They were all addicted to drugs, and they were just rougher guys. They were just rough. And keep in mind that when the Pistols and first started, they were just kids, and so they saw these older guys who they were a little afraid of. And anyway, so Thunder writes London Boys, which kind of a mocking sense about it of the British punk bands. But this is a great record, and maybe his the pinnacle of his career right here. Fantastic solo record, full of great songs, fun, some good covers, and just I can't say enough about this. If you like that kind of punk, proto-punk sound, this is a fantastic record, and yeah, I always love this record. And so there's four really classic records that Thunder was a part of, and basically securing his place, I think, in if you're going to look at rock history and look at the history of punk rock, you'd be unavoidable to forget about Johnny Thunder and his contribution to all that. So, and then there's one more record that it's not just one more. There's other good stuff in their career. These are 5 records that you could grab fairly easily that would, I think, give you a good overview of his career. There's more. There's a lot more. And there's some really interesting stuff that he did after his solo record. But it's bits and pieces, and you really kind of, I think, have to be prepared for some. There's a lot of rough demos, some really bad live recordings, but one live recording that is just a wonderful, wonderful example of the Heartbreakers at the height of their powers. Was so what they would do after his solo record came out. The Heartbreakers were already kind of legendary at that point, and so whenever there was a need for money, or they were always able to kind of pull the Heartbreakers back together and do some live shows, and they could easily sell out the bigger rooms, the bigger theaters in New York, certainly, and pull together some quick cash. This is from '79, so this is kind of later after the solo record, and it's live at Max's Kansas City. And this is the best live recording I've ever heard of the Heartbreakers, or of Johnny Thunder for that matter. Not saying there aren't other good ones, but this is a great record. It takes most of its songs from the Heartbreakers album. It takes a few tracks from his solo career, and there's a couple of New York Dolls tracks on here too. I think they're renamed, if I'm not mistaken. I think Milk Me is a New York Dolls track. But this is a great hard rock, and you can feel the sweat, and what a great night this must have been to be able to experience live. If you want to talk about like seeing a great rock and roll band live, in a theater, that this would have really been kind of a big part of that. I think this record is really vital, as vital as those other 4, to showing the Heartbreakers, and specifically Johnny Thunder, in his kind of natural environment, which was in a live setting. And so, yeah, great record, and can still be had fairly. And there's some reissues, I think, that you shouldn't have a hard time getting a hold of a copy of this. And great record. So, 5 records that the Two Dolls records, the Heartbreakers, and the live album, and then his Johnny's first solo career. Now there are some other records. There's one in particular I have a CD of called "Hurt Me," which is that title tells you something about John. Johnny seemed to have all these kind of like, you know, it's always about tragedy and harming. But there's a great album that you can get on vinyl, and my version is on CD, and it's an all acoustic, which is really unusual for Johnny Thunder to hear him, performing acoustically. And it almost like it shouldn't work. Like he's just such a, kind of raw rock and roll figure. And then to hear him doing these, there's a great version of "Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory," done solo, just him and the guitar, and it's just beautiful, and in the kind of like tragic way. And there's lots of covers on the record, and it's just something that it shouldn't work, and yet it's just maybe one of his finest recordings. If I had the vinyl, I would have showed it. I should have grabbed the CD, but it's a great, whatever way you get it. That's maybe, if you're going to take another step. It's a little bit indulgent. There's a lot of tracks on there, a lot of cover versions, and if you're not a fan, that might not be, you might not want to pour through all of it. But if you are, and you see Thunder the way I do, and as this kind of sympathetic but difficult figure in kind of pre-punk history, that New York CBGB's Max's Kansas City scene in New York, where the Ramones and Television and the Talking Heads and all came out of that. Blondie all came out of that same scene. Great exciting time in rock history. And anyway, just kind of wanted to do that, and I hope everyone's doing well. Crazy times that we live in, and music, is one of the saving graces from everything I see being undone and destroyed. And it's not just going to be in 4 years we get a new president and they can repair all the damage that is done. It won't. It'll take decades to repair the damage that he's going to do to, Social Security system raises more people out of poverty than any other program in human history. And when we installed that program in our government, it brought more people out of poverty than anything else the government has ever done. And we're dismantling it so that billionaires can have a tax cut. I don't understand. Anyway, sorry to be political. Can't help it. And all right, thanks everyone.